Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. We all love our boas and they're a top priority in our life, but let's face it, we all have lives outside of the boas, or at least we should. So what do you do if life calls and you have to take a trip or go on vacation somewhere, which causes you to need to leave your boas maybe for an extended period of time? Well, that's what I'm going to cover in today's episode. I'm also going to talk about what to do if you have gravid boas that might be giving birth and something happens and you have to leave them, which is every breeder's worst scenario. And this is a situation I faced over the summer and I successfully navigated it. So I'm going to share my experience with you, so be sure to stay tuned for that. The first thing obviously to mention is that boas are very self-reliant pets, and compared to other pets like dogs, cats, horses, even tropical fish, they require very little care. In fact, you can leave your boa, generally speaking, for up to a week at a time, provided that the boa is in good health and that the cage is cleaned and the boa has fresh water, etc. Generally, you don't have to be that worried. In fact, when you go away for a few days, it's pretty likely that your boa is not even going to notice that you've left. So that's one of the main advantages, or a big plus about keeping boas. They don't require the day-to-day care that a lot of pets do require. Of course, it's up to you to determine the exact amount of care that your boa requires for every given situation, and not all boas, of course, can be left when you go away. If you have a boa that's sick or has special needs, or there's just something particular about that particular boa that requires this extra care, you might not be able to leave it like this. But in general, a healthy boa in a nice, properly set up cage is not going to require care for a week if you're away, and they're very forgiving in that respect. So of course, when you're away, you probably want to be able to monitor your boa. And fortunately, we have some technological solutions. There's a wide variety of different cameras available that you can put in your snake room or even in your boa's cage, and you can have a 24/7. You can look in on your boa via a camera that's hooked up to the internet or to your phone. This is a camera that I've used to monitor my snakes when I'm away, and I'm not like a tech geek. I don't know all the cameras. I didn't really research it. This is just a camera that my wife got, I think, off of Amazon. But it's a pretty simple camera, but easy to use. Basically, you just place it in the room, strategically placed where you want to film. The camera can be controlled using your phone. You just have to download an app onto the phone, and you can basically get a 24/7 view of the whatever the camera's filming through your phone, and it's real simple to use. And there's like all kinds of different technological options available. Some of you guys probably have a much better handle on the best cameras to use to remotely monitor your snakes. If you have an experience, please write it below. It'd be great for the whole community to learn from your experience. But these cameras are simple, they're inexpensive, easy to set up, and they're a really good way to keep tabs on your snake if you have to leave the house for a day up to a week or so, or for an extended period of time. Depending on your living situation, you might not leave the boa completely alone. If it's just you traveling, you might have a spouse or significant other that remains at home. And even if they're not really into the boas or well versed in caring for the boas, they can at least look in on the boa, make sure everything is all right, talk to you on the phone, do simple things if, the need arises for them to do something simple to care for the snake, etc. And, every situation is different, so you're the best judge at how you want to leave your snakes in the care of significant others. Some of us also have friends who are into snakes, so if you have a friend, ideally a friend that lives locally, they can stop in and check in on the snakes every once in a while. But it's always good if you are a member of a herpetological society. That's a great place to meet people who can potentially check in on your snakes when you're not going to be around for a while. You also might hire a pet sitter. And a lot of us have pets in addition to the snakes, cats, dogs, birds, whatever. And obviously those pets need a lot more constant care than boas, and you need someone to check on those at least every day. So sometimes you can have a pet sitter that cares for the other pets, and we'll just have a quick look at your boas just to make sure everything's all right. But in general, if you're only going to be gone for about a week, you probably don't want this pet sitter to give them any care. You don't want them feeding the boas or handling the boas, especially if they're not really experienced in snake keeping. And, in general, I always, would never want to have somebody handling my snakes when I'm not around. It's just a terrible idea. So in this situation, I would recommend, unless the pet sitter is really well versed in caring for snakes, they don't actually administer any care unless you're going to be gone for, at least a few weeks, in which case they would need to give the care to the snake. Some people will also actually bring snakes to a boarding situation, either like a pet sitter that you bring the snake to, or sometimes pet stores will board snakes, sometimes even vets will board snakes. In general, I would not recommend this for your boa unless it's going to be a very long period of time. And the reason is, whenever you remove your boa from its home and take it into another environment, you're going to increase the risk. Okay, so you're going to put stress on the snake by transporting it to the new environment. The conditions at the new environment are not going to be the same. And then there might also be lots of other snakes there, like at a pet shop. And so this is just a really bad idea. If you want to avoid diseases like IBD and parasites like mites, bringing your boa into an environment with lots of other snakes is just a really bad idea as far as possibly being infected with these diseases or parasites. So I would say, unless you're going to be gone a really long time and don't have any other alternatives, or you have a snake that's sick, you might want to have a vet care for it for a little while you're gone. But in general, the best place for your snake is to remain at home in its environment, where it won't be exposed to other snakes, which could potentially give it parasites or disease. So to summarize, if you're a pet keeper and just have a pet boa, generally it's not that difficult to set them up so that they'll be fine while you're away, up to about a week or so. And using a remote camera is definitely a good idea if you want to keep close tabs on them while you're gone. But how about if you're a breeder? And as I've said many times before on my channel, breeding snakes is a huge responsibility. And if you get seriously into the breeding, it's really going to affect your life. You're really going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. Part of this is vacations. And we all like to go away. We all like to take vacations. Unfortunately, when you have a lot of snakes that you're breeding, you really have to rethink this. As far as breeding, boas are seasonal. And the majority of the boa births happen in the late spring and over the summer. So you can plan your vacations around this. You can take a vacation during the late fall or over the winter when your snakes are not going to be giving birth, most likely. And if you can change your schedule this way, this is one way that you can still manage to get a vacation while leaving your snakes, and you can still manage to breed them. Of course, the traditional vacation season is the summer. And if you have families with kids, they have the summer off from school. So it can be really inconvenient to try to take a vacation with the family over the winter. In addition, sometimes we have trips that aren't really vacations, but they're trips that we have to take. There might be a family situation that you have to go to. And this might come with not too much warning, and it might happen over the summer. And in fact, I had a situation over the summer this year, 2022, and I had seen my family on the East Coast for about a little over 2 years because of the COVID situation. There was no travel. So I have my mother, my siblings, and my nieces and nephews live on the East Coast. And 2 years is a pretty long time, when you have kids growing up and you have, parents that are getting older. It's a long time to go without seeing them. And so we had planned this trip over the summer, and I knew that it was going to require a little bit of juggling. I wasn't completely comfortable with it, but sometimes you have to put your family a little bit before your snakes. And so in order to prepare for this, the first thing that I had to do was just predict when all of my snakes were likely to give birth. And luckily with boas, they have their post-ovulation shed, which happens about 2 weeks after they ovulate. And it happens about 105 days before they're due to give birth, give or take about a week in either direction. So if you monitor your boas closely, you write down all the sheds, you should have a pretty good idea about when to expect them to give birth. Of course, this isn't 100% since there is, a small percentage of the time, maybe like 5%, they don't have the post-ovulation shed, so you're kind of left guessing. You can also look at when they've given birth in the past. If you have the same boas that are giving, their second or third litter, or you have the same type of boas, generally they all will give birth around the same time in your facility. So that's a pretty good guide as well. And I know from my experience that most of my non-red tail boas, the dwarf boas, island boas, morph boas, things like that, are going to be giving birth between May and July. Most of my red tail boas are going to be giving birth in July up to September, and that gives me a pretty good idea. So anyway, I had written down all my post-ovulation sheds, and I was able to predict that of all my apparently gravid females, there was only 2 that had a possible due date that fell within the week that I was going to be gone. So at least I was able to narrow it down. One of them was actually this female. This is a Cocker Key boa. She was a first-time breeder this year, and she had that shed, and her due date was actually predicted to be like 2 days before I was going to go away. So it was a little bit nervous, but I know from experience using the 105 days for the dwarf boas and for the boa imperator in general, typically they give birth a little bit before that. So it's more like 100 days. So I felt, she'll probably give birth before I go away. And that indeed was the case. She actually gave birth about 4 days before I was going to go away, which gave me adequate time to care for the babies, get them set up, give her a meal, get her cage cleaned out, do all the things. So she was all taken care of. But I knew that, I needed to have somebody on the ground that could take babies out in case one of my boas did give birth when I was gone, and the babies needed to be removed from the mother. And I wasn't exactly sure how this was going to play out, so it was kind of a nail biter. Actually, what I did to prepare, when I had predicted that I had only 2 females that could give birth, I moved their enclosures out of the snake room where they would be easily accessible by a potential pet sitter. And I did this about a month or so before their due date. I just wanted to, you don't want to move gravid females. You want to care for them and be as gentle as possible with them. So I got them set up, in cages outside. That was also the time that I was experimenting with my remote camera and setting it up in the best way so that I could monitor the animals while I was gone, in case they happened to give birth when I was away. So anyway, this female gave birth a few days before, so I was in the clear with her. I had another female, well, I'll show you in a minute, a Suriname red tail that I predicted might give birth about 3 days after I left based on the post-ovulation shed. So I was a little nervous with this. So we actually found a pet sitter who had some snake experience. We reached out to one of our friends who had snake experience, and she was actually going to be away, but she recommended this other woman, and it turned out this woman had worked at a local nature center where they have a lot of demonstration snakes, ball pythons, corn snakes mainly, and she actually bred them at the nature center. So she had some experience with at least corn snakes giving birth and handling the babies, things like that. So I felt a little bit better leaving them in her care. And so we had her come over. I went through everything. Her main role was to care for our cats and our chickens, actually. But I told her I have these 2 boas, or actually 1 boa at that point. I have 1 boa that might be giving birth when I'm gone. And I want you to check on it, and I'm going to remain in close contact with you to advise you what to do. I told her, don't necessarily take the babies out. I'm going to have to figure it out once they're born, whether you should take the babies out or not. So I was really playing it by ear because, depending on what happened, I wasn't exactly sure what the best situation is. But you want to find someone like this who is flexible and, you can keep in close contact with in case they have to intervene while you're away. This is the female Suriname who was gravid during the time that due to give birth during the time that I had to go away. And she's actually a holdback from 2014, and she is a proven breeder. At the time she had already had her first litter 2 years previous in 2020. Things had gone perfect. It couldn't have been more by the book. So I felt a little bit better about leaving her because I know that she is a successful breeder, you know, and which minimizes the chances that something's going to go wrong. I didn't see any signs of imminent birth in the few days before I was going away, which made me feel a little bit better. Maybe she would be able to go the whole week without giving birth. And you know, like I said, she was in pretty good hands as far as the pet sitter, so I felt a little bit okay about that. But you know, it was definitely a nail biter. So we went away to the beach, actually in the coast in South Carolina, to see my family, and I was checking in every day with my camera, you know, sometimes several times a day. And I didn't see much activity at all for the first 3 or 4 days. And then she started moving around more, which I thought, well, you know, this might be it. Maybe she's going to give birth. And then, you know, sure enough, the next day we got a call from the pet sitter. She had just been by and she had given birth. And so this was about 3 days before I was going to go home. You know, and I felt pretty comfortable with her setup, that the babies would be fine for a few days. I made the decision that it'd be better if the baby stayed with her for the few days rather than to have the pet sitter go in and take the babies out and, you know, have to deal with handling the snake. Even though she's a, you know, docile animal, when boas give birth, they can often become more aggressive. I just didn't want somebody, you know, in my house taking my snakes out without me being there. And, you know, luckily I got back a few days later and everything was fine. I took the babies out, cleaned the cage up, and yeah, she's doing great. You can see she's not breeding this year. She's put back on some of the weight. Her babies are all doing great. A nice, beautiful litter. I think it was 11 babies, no slugs. So just a really nice litter. But one of the things that really helped me get through this situation was just having a good pet sitter that kept in close communication with me and that had some experience with snakes. You know, if we ever go away again, when I'm in a similar situation, I'll definitely, you know, have her come over and, you know, care for the snakes and other pets again. And so, not sure if we're going to be taking any more vacations over the summer. You know, I'll just have to see. You know, in some cases, as I mentioned, something comes up and you don't have a choice. But anyway, the point of this video is that even though we want to give 100% attention to our boas all the time, especially the pregnant females, sometimes life intervenes and you just have to go away for a little bit, in which case it's not the end of the world. You can have people come and help to get you through this whatever situation. And of course your situation is going to be different, so you'll have to kind of play it by ear depending on, you know, what's going on. So I hope this video was helpful. I'm sure that some of you guys have had situations with boas that you've had to leave, possibly even gravid boas. So if you want to chime in and comment below, it would be really helpful to get your experience and share with the rest of the group. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching and enjoy your boas.